Welcome to another episode of the Better Dental Life podcast. So excited to have my guest here today, Ryan Miller. Ryan is in Phoenix. He's a Phoenix-based entrepreneur. He founded Peerlogic in 2020, so not that long ago. But if you can imagine what's going on in 2020, an exciting time to start a business. And started Peerlogic to streamline what's going on in the front office operations using AI. So excited to talk to him today and learn a little bit about what's going on in our front office and our front desk and what he's seeing with his company. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I'm looking forward to talking to you and to your guests and to really unpack what we found, what's working, what's not in the front office.
Cool. So first, maybe just tell me a little bit about why you started 4 years ago. How did this company come about? What got you interested and how did you start?
Yeah, so I had a company before this. I had an exit in 2012. During that time, I was looking for great opportunities and met my wife, and probably the best opportunity in my life. So my wife works for Patterson Dental. So naturally, we have a bunch of friends that are in the dental space, if not dentists themselves. And it always was interesting to me to to learn more about the operations of a dental office. During that time, learn more and more about the front office's role in some of the problems that the operators of dental offices face. And that's how Peerlogic came to be. We took some of the technology that I had learned in my previous life, pointed it towards some of the problems in the dental office, and we're ready to go to market.
I love it. Now you started in 2020. Any like specific challenges starting your company then? Like how did
Oh,
that
fantastic
roll
timing.
out?
Just absolutely great timing. So I signed my lease to our office 1 week before we were shut down. So I had a big, beautiful office all to myself, which is great.
That's nice. You really were able to isolate and keep away
That's
from
right. That's
people.
right. Really get in my head. No, so it was unique, but at the same time, we weren't the only ones struggling. Uh, it was a unique time for the dental world, right? It was with staffing was almost impossible. Dentists were working front office, back office, doing janitorial services. So, and then here's me bugging them, trying to do market research. So it was a unique time, but during that time, we were able to identify, more and more of the challenges that operators of offices face.
So and coming into this, did you always want this to be AI based? Was that initially what you were thinking, or did that evolve over time?
Yeah, so to us, AI is just a tool. It's just a tool. We weren't building an AI company per se. We're trying to solve the problems for dentists. So whatever tool best was we could bring best to market is what we'd use. Like if we could do this using SQL, we would have done that. If we could have done it using humans, we'd have done it. But AI itself was at the time the most effective way for us to bring this, to bring visibility into the front office. And over time, it's only gotten better. When we initially started, it was LLMs weren't in vogue, and so it was more hands-on AI. So our data science team definitely earned their stripes.
Right. Yeah, I mean, this is because you're starting before really we saw, the launch of Chat GTP and how it just has changed our world. And so a lot of, I think, AI is still evolving. So you had to, like you said, it was a little more work intensive.
Yeah, we weren't using large language models. We were using our own internal models, and they were outperforming like what the early language models were doing. So we had no we couldn't foresee the big boom as just like no one else could. So
Right.
when language models came on, when like ChatGPT 3 came on and 4, and then some of the open source models, we were able to take all this great data we had and really supercharge our offering.
That's awesome. I love that. So maybe just for my listeners that don't know about Peerlogic or don't really understand what it is, can you give us just this bird's eye view? What is Peerlogic? How can it help offices? But I want to spend more time after you introduce it so people understand that model, why the information you have is really helpful for us today.
Yeah. So when we look at it, like, so Peerlogic, our primary offering is Amy. Amy is our AI agent, and Amy's job is to help the front office. So Amy can do multiple things. One, Amy can analyze all the calls going in and out of a dental office for like revenue opportunities, best practices, performance. But additionally, Amy does tasks that allow the front office to be more patient focused. When you're sitting there and there's a patient in front of you and your phone's ringing, we want you not to have to make the decision to answer the phone and treat the patient like a second class citizen. So like if you miss a call or you need to verify insurance, or even if there's past due billing, you can task Amy to go out and do all those individual time sucking elements, and allowing the front office team to be more present with the patient. So that's what we do. We help make the front office team more efficient, more effective, and hopefully reduce burnout.
Right. Yeah. So I am, my vision, my purpose is to just help dentists fall in love with dentistry again, or for the first time, and have more fun. And this is the type of thing that I see is fun. Like, this helps me have more fun, but it also helps plug a little bit of the unknowns. The dentists that I work with, if they are going to work with team members and train team members, we are really good about training assistants who are with us all day and doing the things that we already love. We're not great about training office managers and receptionists because that's a little bit unknown. In fact, a lot of us have no clue about what they do up there. And we just hope the last person trained the next generation pretty well, because we don't know what's going on. And I love the potential of what Amy can do, and even just seeing that front desk, like what's going on up there. How can we work with our team members? What's working and what's not? So I want to talk for a minute about what you see with the data you're getting back from this AI in those phone calls. Are phone calls getting missed? Are they being handled appropriately? Are the patient conversations going well? So let's dive into that a little bit. What are you seeing?
Yeah, so it's super interesting. Well, just kind of give you like what we saw when we first came to market. Well, when we look at like enterprise sales and SMB sales, those organizations they're trained specifically to transition inbound opportunities into revenue. You pose that to what dental offices or medical as a whole, their primary job is for patient care. So a lot of times when the phone rings, it's viewed as a burden, not as an opportunity. Even though you may be spending thousands of dollars in marketing to make the phone ring, the primary responsibility of the front office is not to drive revenue through that call, but to take care of the patients in front of them. So that was something that was super unique compared to like almost every other industry in the world. So we looked at that and said, okay, how do we provide more visibility into what's going on in the front office? And we were able to identify some really unique traits. One, just identifying like how many new patients called in, how many of them converted. So people, like patients looking to call in to schedule an appointment, like maybe it was me. I called to schedule an appointment. I found you on Google My Business, and for whatever reason, I need to go talk to my wife. I need to find my insurance. And so I would end the call, not book my appointment, because there was always some little piece of data we needed. We found that it took 2.5 calls on average to book that new patient. And typically, after that phone's hung up, it's just gone away. So that was one unique element that we found, is that there was no real follow-up cadence in place for the front office. So marketing's working, front office is doing their job, patient didn't do their job. They weren't prepared to book the appointment. They went out, they had to go pick up some piece of information, and then they were just off to the ether.
That blows my mind just right there, that it's, I guess I've always just assumed when a new patient is calling the office that the sales, we get them scheduled, and then the sale is at the new patient exam. When I'm going in there, I'm putting on, a little bit more of the sales hat. And dentists hate the word sales, but the reality is sales is everything we do. Sales is,
For profit businesses, right?
yeah. And, sales, my wife sold me last night on what show to watch. And she wasn't like, had any, used cars salesman malicious intent. It was like, hey, I loved this show. I think we should watch it. try it out. And so everything sells, and sales can be really, really come from the heart about the best interest of the patient. So getting that aside, the ugliness of what we think sales is, it really is can be amazing. And I assumed that sales kind of happened later. I didn't realize that many calls, that much opportunity lost. And
Yeah.
I would have assumed they called and either scheduled or didn't. Not that we had follow up, that there was extra calls. So that's really eye opening to me that it's 2.5 calls before we're actually getting them in the chair.
Yeah, only 27% of new patients that call in trying to schedule an appointment actually book that appointment. And a lot of times it could be from some of the burden on the front office. Maybe they're not trained properly, but a lot of times it's just the patient not being prepared. Most of the time, not being prepared. Like you may have siblings or family, children, wife, whatever. You need to get more information. So and then it just goes into the ether. But during those calls, a lot of times we're also not doing best practices, right? We're not,
Yeah.
nurturing the value of the doctor's specialty. We're not providing any levels of urgency to get in. So there are some areas that we can help coach the front office on, but largely it's just organization around the influx of opportunity.
Yeah. And we don't hire salesmen to be in the front desk. I
Right.
mean, our front office is either maybe they were an assistant before and they wanted to try something different and they're at the front desk, but the front desk, depending on the size of the practice, we likely have an office manager or someone that's handling insurance and somebody that's there as a receptionist. But a receptionist is, especially today where hiring is a little bit difficult, that it's a warm body, not a college trained salesperson. It's who had the best smile when they came in for the interview. And that's who we hire.
And so we found that it just taking, and they're, again, you just pointed out they're working as concierge and receptionists, trying to make the person in front of them as comfortable as possible, getting them prepared for whatever procedure maybe exam or procedure that they're going to do. With that, we found that another piece of data, we found that regardless of size, one single practice or some of our practices have hundreds of locations. On average, we miss 38% of all our calls.
Just
So,
didn't even get the phone answered. Busy with another patient whose face, and that's what we think, right? Whoever's there physically is the most important one.
right.
But that
Or you
many calls
called
getting
in to
lost
do
is a lot.
perio charting, or for whatever
Yeah.
reason, we ask the front office to do 100 things, and sometimes those calls just aren't the number one priority.
Now, can you track whether those individuals call back? Do we ever get to them? Are they
We
lost
do.
forever? Do they leave a message?
So we track those, but more often than not, they just they leave messages. But the new patients, more often than not, just are on to the next,
Next
the next.
dentist.
Yeah, because they Google dentist near me or
Right.
whoever the next one is. We also found that the majority of new patients calling in aren't from marketing apparatus; they're from referrals. They're from
Okay.
either other dental referrals or family referrals. So tracking that as a practice is super helpful because if you have one family member, they may give you 3 to 5 more leads as the years go on.
We because we don't understand this marketing and even kind of funnel marketing in some ways, like that's a completely foreign idea to most of us dentists. And so the idea that we spent some money marketing and then we get them into our funnel and then we have this new patient call and then, what do we do with that? Not only do we not understand that kind of process, but we're not tracking well about what's effective and what's not. So in fact, I had a friend just this week, um, in a group of dentists chat, was kind of joking about he's done a lot of marketing and they've been 0% effective. And the question was like, well, how do you know what's not and what is? And he's like, well, I didn't really get any calls from that. So there's just this lack of awareness of what's working and what's not, and not tracking. And
Right.
so, maybe how does this work for tracking? What are the best ways to track that? And then are you seeing any trends with marketing and what is working and what's not?
Yeah. So a lot of times we find that marketing is effective. It is effective. It will drive in new opportunities, but if you're not going out, they get lost somewhere in the pipeline between call to production, right, and to collection.
Yeah.
So going back to it takes 2.5 times. Marketing, they only get one shot at it. There's only one bite of the apple on front for marketing. They essentially did their job, got the patient to call in, but for whatever reason, that patient didn't convert into a booked appointment. So we find that through our application, we can identify. I mean, not just us, but there are a lot of applications that can do this. AI can effectively identify why that person called in. Were they calling in? What was their lead? What was their source? Did they call in from the website? So once you have a more clear vision of what's being presented to the front office, you can start to make better tweaks. You can say, look, we're getting enough at bats. We're just we're just not following up on these parts, and that's kind of like the big aha moment we see with the practice. Hey, marketing's working. These are the opportunities. Right. And we're not a marketing company. We're just we're just an analytics company.
Right. Yeah, just tell you whether it's working or not.
Right.
And what isn't working.
And what isn't working. Correct.
Yeah. Do you have a sense for how those phone calls are going? Like if they're, positive phone calls? I know Amy can tell on a conversation if it was a negative call or if it was a positive call. How do you decide that, and what does that mean?
Hundreds of millions of calls. so time and effort. So we built our own sentiment models to say this is we use the did they answer the smile type of methodology. Was it a because it's a low bar to say is this positive or negative, because largely everybody's positive. Because most people just aren't mean. They're just nice. You don't intentionally try to be a jerk when you answer the call. So we're like, was this overtly positive? Did they sound like they were excited to take the call? And conversely, did we feel like we were a burden? So that was our spectrum of positive to negative, and that's how we gauge sentiment. And we just did that over listening. I mean, is it subjective? Of course. The way people talk in San Diego or Oregon are far different than New York and Boston. So it could be subjective based on where you are in the country.
Well, and it always has been. I mean, the closest thing we've had in the past to this in tracking how those new patient phone calls were doing is a number of us years ago would record the calls and then listen to them later to kind of see how our front receptionist was doing on the call. So we'd record them, then we'd listen, and receptionists hated it. We hated it because we had to, like, one more thing to do. We're listening to these recordings, and then we had to have a conversation about, okay, let's maybe answer this a little differently or feel a little differently. And anything that we can do that makes looking at the data less painful is really, really helpful. And so we want to get the data. We want to know how it's going, but we don't want it to be a painful experience.
Yeah, and we like that too. So we like to think that, hey, let's filter out the calls that are most important. Do you really care if your distributor's calling in how that interaction went? Probably not, right? That's probably low on the priority. At the same time, is this a new patient that didn't book? Probably want to know why, right? You probably want to, okay, did this new patient called in about veneers, didn't end up scheduling? Probably want to elevate that to a top of your review bucket. And during that, so we have ability to do that, right? Say these are the highest valued calls that didn't book. And one thing we did notice is that when a front office member calls back, has a low chance of booking. But when a practitioner is ever to call back an opportunity, they convert like at 75 to 80%. It's a weird dynamic for the patient to receive a call back from a practitioner. There's a dynamic, there's a authoritative dynamic that changes when a practitioner calls in. They're like, that's super, because it's odd, right?
Yeah.
If there's an opportunity you see that we can help ferret out, say, look, this is a veneer case, and you want to spend 5 minutes on that, more than likely that patient's going to come in.
That's interesting, because I've been playing with ideas and talking to some other dentists about marketing funnels and kind of traditional marketing funnels, even like from my coaching standpoint. I use funnels in marketing from coaching standpoint that ultimately I become the individual that's having a consultation with the other dentists about, hey, am I right fit for you and your practice? And so what I was playing with is this idea of um, funneling people into a video conference with the dentist about these high ticket items. Now we're talking about, you know, all on X kind of
Right.
implant cases, you know, the $50,000 implant cases, and even like Invisalign, a $5,000 Invisalign case. These high production cases that patients are calling specifically for that treatment, somehow funneling them into a conversation with the provider themselves. So I love this idea of filtering that out because we didn't ever do it and try how it worked, but that was kind of the thought. That was the idea of how could we funnel them into that conversation.
The data proves you right. I mean, we see day in, day out the practitioners that take that next step and that call back that patient that's looking for implants or veneers or Invisalign, more often than not are going to schedule that patient.
Oh,
And
I love
it's
that.
and it's a relatively easy thing to suss out too. You just have to, it has to be part of your daily workflow. Even office managers have a higher, if an office manager calls in, or an assistant or associate, those are still higher than you'd expect. But the practitioner themselves, even a text message, highly effective.
So, how does the conversations with AI work out? If it's Amy that's responding, either via text or somehow, you know, calling back or answering the call, do patients know it's AI? Do they respond differently to that? How does that feel for
So
people?
you can rename Amy to an AI bot or whatever you want.
Right?
It's your personal opinion or your personal choice. We found that the highest level of engagement is when you just leave it as Amy straight. And
Yep.
most of our patients don't know it's a bot. Because the one thing that we did early on, we noticed was that if we respond back too fast, it looks clearly like a bot. So we had to
Uh-huh.
slow down some of Amy's responses, make it more deliberate. Um, but our engagement went through the roof because they thought this was the office texting them back. Um, and just that interaction alone, getting those patients in, taking that workload. If I, I would, as a front office staff member, I would think that one of the more troublesome parts of my day would be the red flashing light at 7 a.m. on Monday, 8 a.m. on Monday,
Yeah.
because that's your 8 a.m. canceling, right?
Yeah,
That's
and that's when the patients love to call, so they don't have to talk to you.
that's right. This if Amy could at least relieve that tension, that's great.
Yep.
The after hours, but additionally, one area that we could do a better job at is driving urgency. From you may have proposed treatment, you may have even a treatment coordinator at the end that helps go through the financing options. But once that patient leaves, reminding them that this is the proper treatment, this is the proper care, this is what you need to do, and getting them back in for that treatment sooner than 6 months. So I'll give you an example. Every 6 months, my dentist tells me I'm a fantastic candidate for Invisalign. And like,
Right.
if there was a little bit of nurturing between now and then, more than likely I would have just received the treatment while I was going in to get my next cleaning.
Yeah.
These are
Yeah.
great.
So every 6 months, you're like, okay, great.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, great.
Yep. This cavity's on watch. Okay, see you in 6 months and see how it goes.
Yep. Yeah.
And those little things are great for AI. Those little nurtures are great for AI. Collecting bills. Nobody wants to call the patients. You call the patients and say you owe $9 or $140.
Right.
Another thing that AI is great for. Um, there's a lot of tasks that AI can do that really frees the front office to be focused on the patient in the practice. And I think that's some of the more exciting parts that we'll see start to evolve over the next months and years to come.
Yeah, and where do you see that evolving? Do you see that role becoming I mean, more mainstream for sure. I mean, you're in a lot of practices already, but you know, we see that grow, but where do you see the evolution too? Do you see that actually being kind of replacing the value of one person at the front office like or how do you see that?
Well, we hope that it doesn't replace the value of one person, but we generate so much more revenue for the practice that that they need that one
You
other,
need it, right?
right.
It's one less person you had to hire because of
That's
it.
right. I mean, so our goal is a superpower. Is to make the front office tasks, the front office team member, as effective as humanly possible without adding additional work to their work. So,
Yeah.
I in the future we expect as at least our customers become more, and we're already seeing the trends now, become more and more accustomed to texting or interacting with AI. They're getting the results that they want. They're scheduling, they're booking, they're checking pricing, they're getting all the they're getting all the information they need. So I see that becoming more and more prevalent over the next couple of years.
And I think that's, at least right now, um, with these language generation AIs, um, Chat GTP and the others that are like them, the open source, my kids, I've got teenage kids, um, and school was freaked out about this. And so like it was banned from everybody. But I pulled my kids aside and said, look, this is the future. This is something you need to learn how to use. And so just between us and at home, I want you to use these, but you don't use this to do something for you. Use this as an assistant. Use this as an adjunct to what you would normally be doing. So if you're writing a report, use it and then go through that report and edit and change it and make it yours. But um, yeah,
Yeah,
being scared of it didn't work. And now I think everybody's a little more comfortable with it. But the value isn't so much a replacement, like you're saying, but a superpower. It makes us all better.
yeah. I mean, I wish I would have had it during taking differential equations. That would have made
Yeah,
my life a
seriously.
lot. That would have made my life a lot easier. Still have lingering nightmares about that class. But at the same time, we don't want to scare our children away from prompt engineering, because it's not going away. You're going to want to use these tools. It's like you don't want to teach your kids not to use a calculator just
Right.
because it's they're not going anywhere. But you're right. There's got to be a fine balance. You still need to learn the solutions. How you get there is less relevant.
I can't even remember who said it. It was somebody significant that I should remember, but said, AI won't replace humans. It'll just replace humans that don't use AI. And so it's,
Yeah, very true. It's
yeah,
very, I mean, I love it just for clearing out my inbox, if nothing more, right? But as we
yeah.
become more, some of the future aspects of it are super powerful. Especially when we start looking in larger healthcare, drawing correlations between oral health and in general practice health, general medicine. You start bringing those correlations together into one bot is super interesting. There's endless amounts that we can start to suss out.
And then are you now grabbing data from our practice management softwares to then kind of flag and say, hey, these are people we want to reach out to? Um, this was a no-show, or this was a late cancellation that we need to follow up with. Are you able to kind of pull some of that information
Yeah.
yet, or are you still just grabbing from the call?
No, so we're integrated with all the PMS providers. So we know when you call in, Amy already knows you. Already
Okay.
knows your history. If you're a high risk patient, which depending on, there's two different ways we view high risk patients. One is from a medical point of view, but two, are you more likely to cancel? Like
Right.
maybe you canceled the last 4 times in a row. We want to double book you because more than likely you're going to cancel again. So
Yep.
so we get a good historical data from the PMS, and then we also look at all the conversations you've had with the front office. And so bring that into you. So when Amy's interacting with you, they have complete knowledge of your history. Eventually, in the future, that will include clinical notes and in actual conversations. So not only an assistant to the front office, as assistant to the practitioner.
Oh, that's great. I love that. And that's an exciting future. I mean, if it can understand the patient probably better than we're going to be able to at a glance, but instantly understand that patient, flag the most important stuff in the conversation, bring it forward for us to look at and review, but also in that conversation with the patient. That's pretty exciting.
Yeah, that's the future. We fully see that happening, and it's not going to take a long time. The next 5 years are going to be a remarkable time in least in the history of healthcare.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. So Keith Cunningham is somebody I've looked to in the business world a lot, a brilliant businessman and an instructor for businesses. And he talks about three pillars of every business. And, he's not in the dental business, but he's talking about all businesses. And number one is having a team around you with a shared vision and values. And number two is to have some systems in place or structure in your business that is consistent. And then the third is to look at data, look at numbers, have a dashboard that you can see how you're performing and if you're improving. And if you're not, where can you improve? And these are like those three pillars to any business. And I love how this kind of plugs into each of those pillars. It gives us incredible data and evaluates that data, brings it to the forefront. Hey, here's something that is probably missing. And then, there's some structure on things that we are missing in the call, in the follow-up. It's part of our systems that we tend to be pretty weak on. And then getting a team that's excited, because this is a much more exciting way to get a team aligned than the recording phone calls and calling them into my office and saying, hey, when you answered this call, it didn't go great.
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, and then you pair that with some of the data analytics offerings out there, and
Yeah.
some of even the other AI companies that are doing radiograph analysis. There is a ton of data that we're presenting, to practitioners. It can be overwhelming, but it's only overwhelming at the beginning. It starts to get
Yeah.
very comfortable the more and more you use it. You don't need a BI tool or something like that. You just need to become find your North Star in every piece of analytics and dive in.
Yeah, and that's true too. I mean, when the data is overwhelming, you don't have to solve every problem immediately. You say, okay, we're going to focus on this one thing. We're just going to look at these two data points for now, and then when we master that, then we'll jump on to the next few.
Right. And maybe it's identifying, just saying, hey, when we see a high valued call come in, let's make sure we'll call this potential new patient. Let's make sure we answer that one first.
Yeah.
the, no,
No, I love that. I think that's kind of a brilliant, exciting future. I'd love to talk for just a minute about you from a business standpoint, some of the challenges, what um, dentists that I talk to, many of them are kind of getting burned out. They are, um, some are, new to their practice and they're excited, but those who've been dentists for a while, they're getting a little bit burned out. They really haven't been trained in business. So historically, things just worked really well. Margins in dentistry are great, that we just make things happen. Um, I've seen a lot of different data on how many businesses fail, and some as much as saying, 8 out of 10 businesses fail in the first 5 years. But whether that number is exactly right or not, they're high. But dentistry seems to just work, or it has in the past,
right.
because our margins are great now. And this is really just the last few years. Our margins are getting a little tighter. We're getting squeezed. Insurance reimbursement hasn't gone up. Our prices haven't gone up, but our costs have gone up, especially with our team members. And so we're now feeling that squeeze, and suddenly we're having to pay attention to business. So what can you say, like starting up, and this is why I'm fascinated with you in terms of business, starting up at a really tough time when you were the only man in your new lease. And what can you say to the businessmen out there as dentists about, when things get tough, what to look for, and things to think about from a business standpoint?
Yeah, there's always, I mean, especially when you're first starting, I can imagine, I mean, at a software company, I know I kind of knew what I was getting myself into. It's going to be expensive. It's going to take time. I have a 5% success rate in the first year, like a 2% success rate within 3 years. So you have to be a little bit crazy to start a software company. Um, it's probably not to the extent that as a dentist, luckily every human needs a dentist.
Right.
So there is demand, but there is also a lot of competition. Um, I think a lot of times that, uh, especially from the friends I had in the dental space, uh, they miss that they miss the fact that they have to still go out there and compete. You still have to get your operation in check. You have to make sure your marketing's dialed in. Make sure that you have a vision for what you guys want to do as an organization, and and have your staff understand that vision. It's not just provide great oral care. It's provide it for this area. There's got to be something else that motivates the staff, because staffing, like you mentioned, especially in 2020 and on, has probably been, you probably agree to this, the most challenging part of running a dental practice.
Yeah,
Uh,
for sure. And HR, human resources in general, we've been able to ignore for, the last 50 years and just take anybody
that
and not really think a lot about it. And now that's the biggest concern for a lot of dentists.
Now, looking at the technology side of that, you see a lot of we identified this as a huge problem, right? When we talk to we do market research, like what's your biggest problem? Staffing. It's always finding recruiting and retaining good quality staff. And so a lot of companies have gone out there trying to make staff more available, through websites and through recruiting. We took a different point of view, and that's make them more effective. So hopefully require less staff. You can pay your current staff more and still reduce your costs at a higher level and provide better care. I think using technology to make because staffing is expensive. It's super expensive. If you can make them as effective as humanly possible, I think that's a win that most folks don't focus on.
Yeah. I talked about training team members has been a real challenge in the front for us
Yeah.
because we don't understand what they do in the first place, and because we're not back there. We're great at how to put on a rubber dam and do a root canal, and how to set up that room, but we just don't see what's going on in the front. And so, um, maybe talk for a minute about how we can use Peerlogic and Amy to help train our teams now and where you see that going in the future. Like, do you see that as a big part of training new team members? And because there is always, I mean, AI can do so much, Amy can do so much, but there's always going to be the receptionist there that we need to have also on the same page as Amy. We want them to be aligned.
Right. Well, I'd personally say they're taking the technology aside. I have coaches, right? I have coaches that help me out in business. I have CEO coaches. We have sales coaches. So we're always I'm trying to better ourselves. We're in a highly competitive market. Software is highly competitive. There's especially in the medical space, it continues to grow and grow. So we have to continue learning. I don't think that there's going to be a replacement for that knowledge in the dental space for a long time. I think most practices should have their CEOs. Their CEOs of their dental practice. They should have CEO coaches too. They should have folks that are giving them good sense checks, giving them good guidance, giving them good best practice. I don't think we're in a place where you can just rely on technology by itself to provide you good direction and coaching. But when you pair that good coaching with good follow-up and good analytics, that's when you get the win. So a coach comes in there, gives them best practices and hones their skills and teaches them how the most effective practices run, in the world. And then we just hold that honest. We keep them honest to those trainings. We find that to be the best and most effective way still today. It's hard to take guidance from a machine. It really is. But to take guidance from a peer that's killing it, man, that's worth its weight in gold.
That is. Yeah. Yeah. And it's, the A players are not going to be afraid of numbers. They're not going to be afraid of being measured. That's kind of how it is,
Sure.
whether we're owning the practice and being really honest with ourselves when we dive into our numbers. And the B and C players are afraid of the data. They're afraid of being measured. They're afraid of the numbers because they're afraid of what they're going to see and they don't want to change. And so that's going to be the case whether you're as the dentist owner of the practice and you're kind of ignoring things, hoping they'll just get better and go away and your bank account won't shrink. And there's a scary number of dentists that practice that way, or whether you're the receptionist and you're hoping nobody notices how many phone calls are getting missed and how many patients don't schedule and don't call back.
Yeah, I think we need to do. Maybe I think speaking on behalf of Peerlogic, we need to do a better job of making that not as scary as to the folks that don't want to look at the analytics, instead of giving them a dearth of analytics. Saying, "Here's, did you know this one thing? If you were just to
Yeah.
improve on this one thing, that would provide you X." And we talk about that internally all the time. Like, why don't we just send out the one North Star metric to the
Right.
analytics hesitant folks and say, if we can adjust this by doing this, and that's the one thing we found was the identifying patients that have called in that didn't book. Super simple. Call them. Just call them.
Yeah.
Book 10 new patients a month. Just do it that way. It's just, if you're still measuring only by the cash going into your bank account, it'll still work.
It's going to show up on that end.
It's going to show
If
up on
you
that
can
end.
do this one thing, yeah, get
That's
those
right.
patients to call.
And if you start off taking it, if you look at it and say, okay, I'm going to take all these analytics and I'm going to absorb this all, that's tough. But if we try to source the one most important thing to the practice that you should be focusing on. And then a lot of our coaches that will go out there, they'll deep dive into more like, hey, did you know that, people are saying Zoom less, so maybe we don't need Zoom whitening. Maybe we can use other whitening. And
Right.
you can start to, because maybe they're not calling it Invisalign anymore. Maybe they're saying I need aligners, and maybe you don't need to buy
Right.
Invisalign, you buy ClearCorrect or whatever. So there's
Right.
a ton of data you can pull out, but what we're trying to follow up and say, hey, this is the most important thing. Deal with this.
Just
ROI,
one thing.
if anything from us, ROI will be 15 to 20x. So that's worth it.
And if we're going to dive into that one thing, so that one, getting that new patient to schedule, um, assuming we don't miss the phone call
Right.
and we actually talk to them, you mentioned that it's going to be 2.5 calls. So between 2 to 3 calls for that patient to get them to that comfort level of scheduling, get them all the
Yep.
information they needed to schedule. What do those follow-up calls, what makes sense as far as timing for the follow-up calls? And what conversations are we having when we get back to those calls to get them scheduled? What's missing? What are they waiting for? And what do we need?
Two things that we've seen the most successful practices do. One, they really tout the skills of the practitioner. I mean, they bring it up and they almost like they're the star athlete on a team. They're like,
Yeah.
Dr. Davis is ready. You're so lucky you get to see him today. That moves a needle because it shows a passionate ecosystem. That really does move the needle. And number two, you should follow up every day. And those 3 days follow up that same day, that they usually book. You have a higher conversion rate with follow-ups on the same day. But anything over 7 days, you pretty much lost the patient.
Okay. So follow up even the same day is not badgering
Same
too
day.
much.
No, because they just called in. Their highest level of engagements at that moment. So whatever piece of data they have, typically we see the best performing practices ask, when can I call you back? And that's
Yeah.
that's the best. If you say, if you schedule a follow-up call with the customer, if not, call them back before the close of business, give them sufficient time, they'll do it. If not, that second time you call them back, they would have received 2 calls from you, they'll be prepared.
Oh, I love that. That's the most awkward thing for me in the past, and finally I had to just get over it, was teaching my team to treat me like a rock star to the patients. Like, that's a really weird, uncomfortable thing for us to say, okay, when you talk to the patients, you need to tell them how amazing I am.
Right.
That's always really weird to say, but it's so important, so valuable.
Yeah, and the way we do internally is everybody's a rock star in their position. So I mean, it's on you to say, look, I have the best front office staff in the in the state. We are lucky to have this great staff. They make this all look easy, and conversely, they'll do the same thing, hopefully.
Right.
So, but that's what we've seen to be the most successful. I think if we make that more common, and that's something that we could probably do a better job of in our application, is identifying uplift criteria, like saying, hey, we noticed that you really touted the benefit, the practitioner on this call, and that's something we don't measure today, but it's something we should probably put in the application.
Yeah, kind of exciting for the future to look at that and see how that comes out.
And then we take it, then we make that not awkward for you. You say we
Yeah.
can just make it as an analytics.
And what I love is how easily and quickly you can tweak those things.
Yep.
Like, when you pull with the, almost 2,000 practices of data that you've got, and you put all this information in, and then you say, oh, this would be good to start tracking a little more. And we're seeing some of these trends, like how quickly you can shift and improve. That's pretty awesome.
Yes, we do a lot. We do a ton of data analytics internally. Like we identify if there's cancellations going on in a certain area of a certain region of the country, like is there a health concern there? Then we'll look at like our brand or certain brands being mentioned as many times quarter over quarter, but they're losing brand value. But and we also notice that the people with the highest conversion rates typically refer to the doctors or paint them in the light of being rock stars. And
Yeah.
that's something that we haven't measured, but we know to be true. So we should probably start measuring that.
Oh, that's great. I love that. This has been really fascinating for me to visit, and I've learned a lot from you, and hopefully listeners have too, just about, if nothing else, awareness of the value of that phone call, answering that call, what that means to the practice, and following up. That if they have some more information to get, that's not a dismissal, that's not a no, it's just a not yet, and how important that follow up is. So
That follow-up's super important to
yeah.
do it.
Oh, so awesome. Thank you for coming on. I just really appreciate you taking the time and visiting with us. I could talk for hours on this stuff because I get excited. And so I appreciate you taking time and joining us.
Davis, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on.
You bet. We'll talk to you later.
Take care.